It's July the 1st, so it should be full steam ahead from this point onwards for Newcastle United in the transfer market. We're going to be looking at what's next after the Joao Pedro failure. Another domestic winger has been linked, and I'm also going to bring another name forward in the striker department. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. I'm looking to get to 1,500 as soon as possible. Today, as I said, it's July the 1st. PSR is in the rearview mirror for now. Newcastle are expected to ramp up their transfer activity. Of course, they already have done really by bidding for Joao Pedro and also inquiring about other players as well. Anthony Elanga and James Trafford are in the works too. There's conflicting reports just quickly on James Trafford. Fabrizio Romano seems to suggest that the here we go is not too far away, but the valuation still seems to be a bit of a sticking point from other reports as well. So we'll see how that one plays out. That's why I'm not going to be touching on James Trafford too much today. What I will start with though is a little bit of confidence on, I think, Anthony Elanga, because the Joao Pedro deal was a disappointment, as we know. But Keith Downey did a video last night, and also I've spoken to a couple of other people this morning, and it seems to be that failure may focus minds a little bit more for Newcastle going into Anthony Elanga. Obviously, they are about £15 million apart on the valuation. It still very much depends on what Nottingham Forest want to do in terms of if they are open to selling or if they are just sort of playing hardball and bumping up the price, and they will negotiate. I think Newcastle are probably going to go back in with a new bid in the next, I would say, week to 10 days maybe, to see what happens, and I don't expect it to be too close to 60 million. I think it will probably be 50 million plus add-ons, which is exactly what Joao Pedro went for. Again, context though, Forest are building something into Europe. Anthony Elanga has been a massive part of that, but I do think that he is now the main focus above everything else. And they've looked at, there are other possibilities. We've discussed them, like Yohan Bakayoko and Karim Adeyemi and other players. And obviously, Mohamed Kudus has been linked with Tottenham. Chelsea again this morning. I had no idea where the hell he's going to fit in at Stamford Bridge. But if Chelsea do want him, then I think Newcastle are, because of what I said yesterday, not likely to make a move, because those players are very, very difficult to attract for the reasons I said yesterday. But the difference between Anthony Elanga and Joao Pedro and Mohamed Kudus and all the other players that we mentioned yesterday, Gahey, Olise, Howson, is that they do seem to have a clear run. They do seem to be in the driving seat, and it does seem to be a case of if or when they agree the fee. Obviously, things can change. This is what happened with Joao Pedro, but there were always murmurs that Joao Pedro was on the list of other clubs. That isn't quite the case with Anthony Elanga. Again, I'm not trying to suggest that this one will happen by any stretch, but I think that there are slight differences, and also there are more clear reasons why Anthony Elanga would want to join Newcastle, and I've had it told to me that he is keen to join Newcastle. Obviously, you've got the connections with Alexander Isak, which makes a huge difference for two different reasons, because if you're keeping Alexander Isak as happy as possible, then that's only a positive in terms of that, but also William Asulu is very friends with him as well. There's sporting reasons to join Newcastle. There's development in his career. He's the right age for Eddie Howe. Obviously, I've discussed Anthony Elanga at length and whether I think he is the right player and whether I would look elsewhere. We know that, but it feels like Newcastle are really zeroing in on Anthony Elanga at the moment, and I wouldn't be surprised to see some sort of movement. Again, they were a little bit burnt by Joao Pedro, but I do think that they do need to be a little bit cleverer when it comes to Elanga as well, because a couple of times with Mbumo and Joao Pedro now we're hearing that they, in the end, once Manchester United or Chelsea came to the table, they were the only clubs that they wanted to go to. So that's really what you've got to be careful, is if Anthony Elanga really does want to join Newcastle, then that's when you move. Newcastle seem to believe that. I think that one will step up, but let me know in the comment section what you think. I understand why people are a little bit twitchy now because of what's happened with Joao Pedro and Mbumo and other players, and after all, Anthony Elanga is still a domestic player who's costing a lot of money at this stage at the very least. And again, I appreciate that things can change and have changed in the past. It does feel like Anthony Elanga is very much going in the right track in terms of interest, in terms of dialogue with Nottingham Forest. They're still quite a bit away on the valuation, but again, we'll see whether Forest are really interested in selling or if they're just wanting to get as much money out of this deal as possible. But yeah, let me know in the comment section what you think. We're also going to touch on Harvey Elliott this morning because he was heavily linked yesterday, and I'm going to profile him with the trusty FB ref stats as usual. Before we do that, I think we should discuss the likelihood of a move. He's obviously been somebody who Newcastle have been tentatively linked with in the background throughout the summer. They have obviously made moves for Elanga, and as I said, I think that will put everything else on hold at the moment. I think they've looked at the other options. I think Joao Pedro happening in the way it did has focused mind. Elanga will take precedence before anything else happens now. Harvey Elliott's been linked in the past, £50 million on his head from Liverpool this morning. According to The Athletic, 40 million without a buyback. If you're Newcastle and you want Harvey Elliott, there's no way you're giving Liverpool a buyback option, but it would make sense from their perspective to put it in. Germany is probably more likely, and I'll touch on that in a second. And obviously there is the elephant in the room that if Newcastle go in for a Liverpool player, any Liverpool player, then it could open a can of worms in terms of their interest in Alexander Isak and make that a little bit more complicated. So I don't see this one happening, even though I do think that he is a player that Eddie Howe will have looked at and likes. I'm sure that that's the case because he's very much of the right profile. 22, can play off the right, can play in the middle, versatile. And as I say, look at these stats. Excellent, lots of green lines here again. Non-penalty goals, 99th percentile. Shot creating action, 77th percentile. 92nd percentile for shots total. Non-penalty XG is 92%. If you look at the creative ones, pass attempted, 98%. 98% for progressive passes as well. And pass completion. So and then also blocks and interceptions have got high green lines as well in there as well. So he's very much the sort of Eddie Howe type player in terms of creative, good in front of goal, and very, very good defensively as well. In terms of actual stats from last season, 1 goal in the Premier League, 2 assists in 18 games, 3 goals and 6 assists in 34 Premier League games of the previous season. But it's really the Euros where he was successful in player of the tournament, 5 goals in 6 games as England won it. Newcastle, in an ideal world, may look at this as an option. I know a couple of you in the comment section have suggested that as well. And he wants first team football. I think he'd probably love to join Newcastle as well. But it's just too complicated with Liverpool wanting Alexander Isak. That's a very delicate situation that Newcastle don't want to get involved in. And there's lots of clubs in Germany who are very, very interested by the sounds of it. And The Athletic are saying this morning that he's more likely to go abroad. I don't expect Newcastle to be in for Harvey Elliott. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. Yeah, there's a really crucial point that they made in the deal sheet on The Athletic. David Ornstein this morning, who said RB Leipzig are interested, but only on the proviso that they make a sale. And I think anybody who has watched these videos over the last couple of weeks particularly would know what I would rather happen out of that, without mentioning any names. But yeah, I think Harvey Elliott's unlikely, but again, tentatively linked. So many options on that right hand side and in the midfield. They're looking for versatility. Harvey Elliott really does tick a lot of boxes. He just needs football. I think he would improve Newcastle, but they're looking elsewhere. And as I say, the value and also the specific circumstances about negotiating with Liverpool probably mean that this one is not likely to happen at this stage. And finally, I want to profile a striker because, again, something that Keith Downey said in his video yesterday about the value that Newcastle were putting on Joao Pedro, who's a player who wouldn't start up front for Newcastle and would only come in as a number 10 and show his versatility. It's something I've said before about the value of Joao Pedro, and it's something that I think Newcastle maybe have to consider when they're looking at the split of their initial budget before sales. They'll want to go obviously big on a right winger. They're bidding for Anthony Elanga. They've got centre-backs in mind as well. Those are the 2 main positions, as we know, so maybe they don't need to go quite as big on a striker, and they need to be a bit cuter with the striker and find a player who is going to be capable of coming in and maybe showing himself and growing in the team, but also not going to be demanding first team football. So one of the players that I looked at this morning was Karim Konate from RB Salzburg. Again, as I've said, with a lot of these targets, he's coming off the back of a serious knee injury. That is a caveat. He had last season, it was a difficult year for him. That's why there's no FB ref stats again. 9 games in the Austrian Bundesliga, 2 goals. 2 goals in 5 games in the Champions League, though. He's 21 years old. Quite slight in his frame, but a very good finisher, extremely good dribbler. Similar sort of profile in certain ways to Isak in terms of the ability to dribble and finish and take the ball on and create chances for himself. But if you look at this, again, a heat map from Total Football Analysis, 2 years ago, he scored 20 goals in 29 games. And this is a heat map from the season before that when he was emerging. Again, it's not to really show how good he is, it's to show the type of player he is. And look at the pressing stats, look at the intensity of his pressing in the attacking third. He is somebody that you would take a risk on. 50 million euros is his valuation according to transfermarket.com. As I say, somebody you would have to take a gamble on. I could understand any suggestions that maybe he isn't an upgrade on a Sula, and in that case, should Newcastle just give a Sula a go? But he's got Champions League experience. He showed himself to be a proven goal scorer in the Champions League. And, we've spoken about Newcastle needing to be a little bit creative in the sort of positions that aren't the most demanding. And a striker is needed, but maybe not on the same level as a right midfielder or a centre-back where more experience is probably required. There's a chance to take a little bit of a risk here. He's the latest after Sesko, after Haaland, coming out of that Red Bull conveyor belt of strikers. There's obviously that risk, but there maybe is, as I said yesterday as well, an opportunity to get a decent deal here. Maybe £20 million, maybe it's worth it. This is just an idea, as I say, from my suggestions off the back of what Keith Downey said yesterday, which I do agree with, which is that, if you spend big on a striker, it reduces your ability to actually go and sort the deals that you need doing, which are centre-back and right midfield at the moment. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. As I said, I'll be back tomorrow. I've got a big question on tomorrow's show, so be prepared for that. It's maybe not a very popular one, but it may be necessary for down the line. Let me know what you think in the comment section about Konate, about Elliott, or about Elanga as well, and anything else, and I'll see you tomorrow for the next show. Cheers.